Well, as Brother Bill just mentioned, 10 days in doesn't have a lot of time to write a lot of history. And some notice yesterday, it's a little bit unconstructed, but I'll try my best to express what I've experienced, where I've come from, and inshallah, the journey that I take, where I'm headed to. My life has been somewhat standard and different at the same time. Originally, my upbringing was as a very strict Jehovah's Witness, so I was one of those people that go and sometimes hear reactions like that. Sometimes hear people crouching behind furniture, setting dogs onto us, crazy stuff like that. One thing I did get even growing up was no one wanted to hear that. By the time I got to 13, I started to wonder and started to think that, in actual fact, I was being brainwashed. Actually, I was convinced I was being brainwashed by looking internally at the different actions that I observed, people's reactions. And then, you know what? I just never got the whole Jesus thing. I never got why. I never understood why a God as powerful as that would have someone in between us. You go through history, and at some point, then we just had to go through somebody. So I just never got that. Coupled with the typical teenage years of rebellion, I decided to rebel against that sort of thing. I was baptised as a Jehovah's Witness fairly early, somewhere in my early teens. So when I decided not to conform with their standards, somewhere around 16, 17, I used to be dragged out the back weekly for talks on not adhering to standards. I'd had enough and refused any further to go along with that which I didn't believe. It didn't sit right. The consequence of that, of becoming disfellowshipped among that organisation, is that, as someone that grew up in it, is that everybody that you know no longer can communicate or talk to you on the spot. Your family that is devout, my father being an elder in that, which is an equivalent of a priest, and my brother on his way to becoming a missionary, disappeared. So life went on. I moved out, and then when I wished to come home, due to just not getting it right in the world, I was told to come home, I had to become a Jehovah's Witness again. So I chose the road a bit harder than that, because my heart just said, I can't do that. It's a lie. It's living a lie. From that point, and up until now, as an overview, it's been bouncing from pillar to post with no real outcomes. I hated the God that I knew as 18, 19, 17, somewhere around there. My world was ripped from me with no further support, and I never got why a God would do that in any respect when he was sending a message to me that just didn't make sense. None of it gelled. That hatred, I still had obedience in the concept of God, and so I started to search, looking for another religion. And along the way, early touch points were just brief interactions with Muslims and different faiths. But I went down the path of the world, chased material things, followed my own desires, was quite a selfish person. As time progressed, I lost faith altogether in God's existence. I changed from hate to you can't hate something that doesn't exist. And so I searched evolution to such a thorough extent. Some of the brother earlier, Sheikh, mentioning things like abiogenesis, something instantly turning into life. Didn't get it. Not just sort of not seeing that balloon there turn into anything this week. Maybe what was it, 1 in 50,000 zeros, something after chance. I can wait a while, just not swallowing it. And then as you follow back all the different theories of evolution, looked at so many, spent so many hours poring through them all. And some are quite plausible. Some would seem quite plausible. You come back to one point. It just does not matter where you go on your journey, and as soon as you stop getting caught up in evolution, it's junk, how it all happened, right? Let's cut straight to the chase. I always got back to the point there just had to be something that I didn't understand, that we didn't understand, that we don't have the concept, apart from just believing, that just had to be there. There is no other way around it, period. I continue to search. This left me with no path, no guidance. I was not seeing eye to eye with God. Just my bad. I didn't believe in evolution, so I was lost. So I continued to serve my own desires. I came to a point in my life, not that long ago, I didn't know who I was. People go through life and go, I don't know who I was, I've lost my way. No. I physically looked in the mirror and did not know whom I was. I had become so cold, so hard, so dangerous to anything and everything, especially myself and for those that are around me, because I'd become so cold. I was scared in the world, and that's basically where it ended me up, putting up little defences, and that slowly progressed into someone that I didn't like. But at this point, I had said I didn't know who I was. And then signs started appearing. Just as you read them in the Quran, signs started to appear. They started to show me whom I was. Slowly but surely, little bit by little bit, you look at these signs and you go, think nothing of it. It's just a coincidence. It's just a coincidence. It's just a coincidence. People around me were saying, it's more than a coincidence. Nathan, that's more than a coincidence. No, it's just the way it is. It's just my life. One of those signs was to stop taking exogenous substances that intoxicated my mind. You can take vitamins and minerals straight over the counter that will send you in different places you think you're making yourself healthy, and following different paths. And they're actually intoxicating your ability to think straight, among other things. That was the first sign I decided to go, you know what? That came from a Muslim brother many, many years ago. So I stopped that and allowed my mind to come back, because if everyone else can see these coincidences, I can't see these coincidences. We're just talking general people go, it's a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. I started to see signs that have been going on for years, not months, not days, for years, undeniable proof that there is a God. Each of my touch points along the way that had been in a positive sense to do with religion, here, there, moral principles, persons, had been with only Muslims throughout that entire period, had consistently showed that if there was ever to be a God, that it was their God. So much so that somewhere earlier in my life, mid-20s, early 20s, I'd wanted a Muslim wife. Why? Because of their God-fearing properties, their humbleness, by far a majority, their respect for those laws, and knowing that that would help guide me. A decade or more has gone on and my life wandered apart. Certainly someone that was not worthy of anything to do with Muslims. In fact, after reading the Quran, that book was written about me. Most of it, the cursed ones, would have to be the best way of describing where I'd got to. As the different things came out of my mind, I was able to see and piece these signs together, but not as coincidence, but as someone exercising a power that was beyond conception. Someone had had enough power to know everything about, more than I knew about myself. You show it. as I read through the Quran, that put the fear of God in me, the fear of Allah. At the same time, it showed me His mercy, that only a true God could know how thick, slow, stupid. I have always been, even from a small child, my parents used to say, you've always got to learn the hard way, Nathan. You've always got to learn the hard way, Nathan. Non-stop, this year, and I go straight out that year. And sure enough, just as these signs built up, that same mercy was shown. I mean, it always took a slap in the face to get my attention. And it was a slap in the face that it took to get my attention in these signs. In realising at that point in time, looking back at the signs and my touch points, that's when I started to get that, one, there was a God, and that it could only be Allah. So my next contact point was Brother Zaid over there. My contact with Zaid in the university had once again just shown the standards of the Muslims, and my feeling was to, sort of go right to the source. I spoke with Zaid, and he provided me with the Quran, which I took about a week to pore through, read, go backwards and forwards. And that was reading my life. It's pretty scary that a book 1,400 years ago, 1,430 I think maybe, could be so uncannily true about anything to do with my life. I mean, the Bible's a great book. You can take that Bible and you can throw it into any situation. It's so circular in its logical references, so full of errors. People won't notice that sort of thing generally, and that you can just throw it anywhere. It doesn't really apply to the majority of it. It's a man-made book for the majority. The Quran, though, that was 114 surahs of, you just can't write that. No human could write that. And I've heard the challenge, could any human ever write even a verse like that? In my past, I used to rate myself pretty highly. I couldn't write 2 words that could come close to anything that I read in the Quran. But with the fear, the understanding of the mercy, and a peace that I've never, ever in my life experienced, came upon me. Undescribable. My eyes started to open up to see around me, see things that I'd not seen before, to start hearing. And my heart, that was certainly closed off and hard and callous, was opening. At this point, I put a line in the sand and said, this is where we have to stop. The book was that powerful that an about face had to occur. I'm sure that most of us are familiar with the book and the understanding of how far a cursed one may be well into life. The book is also that powerful for when Allah opens one's heart to also do an about face on the spot. 10 days later, as I was making headway on understanding where I'd got in my life, where I needed to go, I went on the path of repentance. It's one of the things in there. I went, well, where do I go from here? I didn't really know. I'd spent about 10 days going to myself, I can't really do any more. I'd searched and read as much as I possibly could about taking in the faith, understanding the faith. And I thought, well, I'll start here. And the first person I stopped with to say sorry to, because I'd been a tool for such a long time. It's all good and well. He said, that's great. He goes, Nate, of all choices, he said, you'd be a terrorist. And probably if we'd had the same conversation prior to reading the Quran, my motivation might have been to become a terrorist because of Western media, because of a lack of understanding. But no, I took heart in that comment and went, his heart is closed. Inshallah, maybe one day it might change. That in actual fact is the complete opposite reason of why I'm here, taking this path. My second stop was to some brothers that I'd asked years ago to teach me about Islam, 3 or 4 years ago, give or take. nothing ever eventuated. So I dropped in, and I was greeted by their uncle. They were away at the time, and we started talking more about Islam. And he said, well, it took me through the Shahada. We slowly went through the Shahada. He's exploring my reasons and my understandings of what I did know, my limited knowledge. And in private, took a confirmation of the Shahada. Later that evening, publicly confirming in my first visit to a mosque, the Shahada and making the declaration. As another sign, I had not gone out on this path, but for a week I'd known that this was only the next possible step. I'd not looked for this step, and yet Allah had put this, along with other steps, just as plain as this to me, to do the right thing. And at that point in time, a peace that went beyond even the peace before. A purpose, a submission. I'd spent all my life fighting anything and everything, inanimate objects even, refusing to ever bow to anything or anyone, and looking for a challenge and a fight in any opportunity, verbal or physical, that I could. And within a matter of weeks of having my heart open, I felt nothing more natural than in the full prostration position to Allah. Allahu Akbar. My experience since that time, and as my eyes have opened, has been to myself none more remarkable than leading up to that and seeing those signs, the support, the signs. I do not have the family that I rely upon for advice or guidance. My wife is a Christian, a Lutheran, and we have been at odds for years since we ever started. It's been a tumultuous relationship in itself. But yet Allah provided. I broke down in tears and I did cry. I cried out to Allah whilst I was correcting my life earlier on, and I cried. And I begged him for his help. Within 6 hours, he'd sent his first sign from a place that you could never expect, just like it says. As I came forward into Islam, the support that I needed was so uncannily placed, there was nothing else but to further confirm that only a true God could have placed it. The timing, when I was weak, when I was most weak, and that to fall prey to my former ways. All I had to do was accept. It was presented and I was accepted. I would accept, and I've been given support. Now drawing back to the wife, my current wife, and wanting a Muslim wife. We'd already discussed since my change, she said she'd not seen such a change, and she said I'd actually turned back into the man that she'd fallen in love with. However, we'd already discussed at this point in time, with my greater understanding, that in actual fact we'd never had a marriage that was, or a relationship that was free of problems. No big problems, we just don't connect on that sort of level. Both placid, peaceful people, yep, that's fine, whatever. And a change happened in her. Last night, my wife made a full reversion to becoming a Muslim. Alhamdulillah. Allahu Akbar. Signs on Tuesday night, a young gentleman brother that took me to the bookstore over in Lakemba. Gifts once again from brothers helping from a searching knowledge I'd already been and bought. And then I have now a library larger than I'd ever imagined ever having with books. He decided to take extra time and teach me an acronym called GORAP, talking about God, the oneness of God, the revelation, and his prophet. Sort of information coming in. And the next day, yesterday, Brother Fadi, he goes, Why doesn't your wife make a reversion? What's stopping her? I had not even thought of asking this question. Just coasting along. I'm pretty stupid and slow. But Allah provides these tools and these signs. So that evening I went and had a chat. It turns out she knows a lot more about Islam than I do. Spending 8 or so years in Greenacre, public school, spending a lot of time in the religion classes, and had formed her own belief in the Shahada. So later that evening she'd taken the Shahada. So from a request in my life, I want a desire from decades ago that no one could have known of, at a time when I needed it the most, Allah provided by opening my heart and then providing me with a wife that was a Muslim. And inshallah, we'll now both take a journey together to the hereafter. In the time that I have had exposure and in the more understanding that I've had, delved into a lot of reading in that time over the last few weeks, months, is the concept of dawah and its importance. As a cursed person, prior to becoming a chosen person, it was those consistent messages that made it. By no way, shape and form, I don't even think Muhammad or Zaid, both knowing me quite well, could ever have probably thought seeing me here or ever saying brother to me. I think they probably would have shot me if they had the first chance. Knowing me well enough, I'm humbled that at the same time they didn't stab me this evening for whatever reason. They'd be well right in the past. But through their dawah and through all the other bits and pieces that have come along the way, and even when I thought I was lost, Allah has drawn it out. So don't lose hope that when we are conducting dawah and you see that arrogant person that walks like this and looks like he'll kill you, or if they think that they own the world and you know for sure they're going to hell, you know what? Inshallah it doesn't happen, but surely I'd be one of the first candidates for probably double length if there was a possibility of that in hell. But things have turned around. So when we do go and do our dawah, one thing I've learnt from my experience and seeing the signs and the push through the lectures that I've been attending over the last few weeks is, Allah becomes the judge and we only do that which He requires, but dawah is a really, really important thing. And without that, and without the constant conduct, good conduct, I wouldn't likely be here. Alhamdulillah. So now moving forward, that's rather wordy for 10 days, so hopefully I won't come back to talk anytime soon, because I'll have just as much to say. I look forward to moving forward with my brothers and sisters, and for those non-Muslims here, hopefully helping influence doing my dawah towards opening your eyes and your heart towards Allah, or showing you the way, and hopefully Allah will open your heart too.